The Iron Warriors, once fiercely loyal, stand as one of the 9 first founding traitor legions of Chaos Space Marines that forsook their allegiance to the glorious Imperium during the Horus Heresy, now relentlessly striving to dismantle the Imperium of Man. Ironically, their Primarch Perturabo was one of the most devoted to his oaths, but darkness can find its way even in the thickies of armors. Similar to the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Loyalist Iron Hands chapter, the Iron Warriors possess a strong inclination to augment their bodies with cybernetic enhancements, reflecting their grim and cold nature. When afflicted by a mutational gift from the ruinous powers, the majority of Iron Warriors tend to sever the affected appendage and replace it with a mechanical counterpart whenever possible, emphasizing the idea of rebellion not only against Imperium, but against human nature itself. Initially designated as the 4th Legion of Space Marines, the Iron Warriors were masters of breaching sieges and destroying fortifications, establishing themselves as formidable rivals to the Imperial Fists Legion, renowned for constructing the most intimidating defenses within the Imperium. This rivalry, especially between their respective Primarchs, played a crucial role in the Iron Warriors' descent into chaos. The Iron Warriors were once the Emperor's elite siege forces, with their Primarch Perturabo, possessing prowess equal to that of Rogel Dawn in the domains of fortification and military strategy. However, Perturabo harbored feelings of resentment as he perceived himself marginalized by his brother Primarch. Each boast of Dawn to the master of the Iron Warriors felt like a barbed insult. Thus, when the Horus Heresy erupted, it was perhaps inevitable that these two Primarchs would find themselves on opposing sides of the galactic civil conflict. In the end, the story of Perturabo is one of neglect. Devoid of brotherly and fatherly love, overshadowed by his brother's glory, he felt lonely and abandoned. After Perturabo accepted the Emperor as his father, renounced his allegiances to his homeworld and everyone he knew and cared for, he was left alone to his bitterness and envy. Some say that Perturabo's fall to chaos was not in search of power or profane blessings, but a desperate attempt to earn his family's respect and attention he was craving so deeply, behind the cold stature of the first Iron Warrior. If there was a path to redemption, maybe Perturabo would be the one deserving to tread on it. Perturabo's early life unfolded on the mountainous world of Olympia, a planet characterized by its incessantly warring city-states. Discovered by the servants of Damikos, the so-called tyrant of Lokos, he was raised as his own. The young Primarch never fully reconciled with this fate, becoming cold and distrustful of others. However, despite his aloofness, Perturabo absorbed the lessons of siege warfare that the chaotic environment of Olympia afforded, mastering both the theory and practice of this specialized branch of combat. As the Great Crusade arrived at Olympia in the year 849 of the 30th millennium, the Emperor revealed to Perturabo his destined role within the broader galaxy. In response, the Primarch pledged his unwavering loyalty to the burgeoning Imperium and ascended to the mantle of Primarch of the Iron Warriors Legion. In accordance with established imperial protocol, Perturabo was declared the Lord of the world on which he was raised, effectively dethroning his adopted father. The 4th Legion subsequently commenced the induction of new recruits, selecting the most capable candidates from the populace of Olympia. In the ensuing campaigns, the Iron Warriors distinguished themselves as among the most proficient siege forces within the Emperor's legions. Perturabo possessed a keen, calculating intellect well suited to the intricacies of this warfare style, along with a natural affinity for advanced technology that enabled him to engage in discourse on the esoteric arts with the most esteemed adept of the ancient mechanic. Cross-training on Mars further honed their specialization until only the Imperial Fists under Rogel Dawn could match their expertise. One world after another that resisted the Emperor's vision fell to the Iron Warriors, capitulating before the spectre of protracted sieges, thereby avoiding the devastation of fruitless conflicts. Yet, as the Great Crusade progressed, Perturabo's resentment towards his role appeared to intensify. In a bid to assert his superiority over Dawn and his fellow Primarchs, he accepted increasingly arduous missions for his legion. Worlds deemed unassailable by others were methodically breached under the relentless application of force. Yet this approach exacted a heavy toll on even the transhuman soldiers of the Iron Warriors. Their grueling preparations led to brief bursts of extreme violence, and soon the Iron Warriors found themselves preferring a defiant besieged defender over a simple surrender, relishing the release of pent-up pressure in the climactic moments of total defeat. Compounding their frustrations, the Iron Warriors were relegated to garrison duties, with small detachments assigned to guard the worlds they had laboured to bring into compliance. While other Primarchs vehemently opposed such a deployment of their legions, Perturabo reluctantly acquiesced, albeit with diminishing grace. As the ominous spectre of the Horus heresy loomed ever closer, it seemed that Perturabo was subjected to increasing pressure, intensifying the fires of his bitterness into an all-consuming inferno. Speculation arose that the War Master Horus himself manipulated events and adjusted forces deployments to Perturabo's detriment, further inflaming his sense of grievance. The situation reached a critical juncture following the death of the Tyrant of Lokos, which incited the people of Olympia to rebel against the rule of the Iron Warriors. Perturabo's fury erupted with cataclysmic intensity upon his return to his homeworld, unleashing a wave of vengeance that resulted in the slaughter of countless innocents and the incineration of entire cities. In the aftermath of his wrath, he found himself engulfed in profound despair, struggling to grasp the enormity of the atrocities he had committed in his rage. However, before he could begin to atone for his horrific actions, news arrived of the War Master's virus bombing of Istvan III, prompting the Iron Warriors to confront the rebels and deliver justice. While history remains silent on the intricate plots Horus undoubtedly orchestrated to turn the embittered Perturabo towards the traitor cause, it is undeniable that the Iron Warriors turned against their brethren during the drop site massacre on Istvan V, sealing their damnation for eternity. Liberated from the constraints that had once bound him, Perturabo unleashed his most destructive impulses, laying waste to world after world in service of the War Master. While one faction of the Fourth Legion forged an empire of iron across Olympia and its neighbouring star systems, another contributed their expertise to the siege of Terra, finally allowing Perturabo's Gene Sons to measure their might against those of Rogel Dawn. The outcome of this clash remains uncertain. Whether Dawn's masterfully constructed defences would have been the undoing of the Iron Warriors can only be speculated, as the War Master fell before this could be determined. The Iron Warriors who participated in the siege of Terra retreated to the Eye of Terror alongside the other traitors, while those who had established their own dominion around Olympia braced for the inevitable assault from the Loyalist legions, which would lead to the campaigns of the Great Scouring. In a grim turn of fate typical of the dark era that heralded the age of the Imperium, the Imperial Fists were among those who besieged the Iron Warriors. Although the traitors were eventually dislodged, it required a grueling solar decade-long campaign that culminated in their detonation of nucleonic stockpiles, leaving Olympia a desolate wasteland. Perhaps the most notorious of Perturabo's campaigns, and reportedly the act that granted him the dark blessing of ascension to Demon Primarch, took place on the world of Sebastus IV. Here the Primarch constructed a formidable bastion, a massive stronghold encircled by kilometre after kilometre of trenches, redoubts, minefields and razor wire. Unlike typical fortresses that serve to protect something, the so-called Eternal Fortress was engineered solely to defy the proud boasts of Rogel Dawn and to ensnare him in a trap from which there was no escape. Despite the protests of his brother, the Imperial Regent Guilliman, Dawn succumbed to Perturabo's taunts, leading the entire Imperial Fists Legion into what would later be known as the Iron Cage. The ensuing carnage was of unprecedented scale, as the Imperial Fists suffered catastrophic losses in a manner not witnessed since the height of the Horus heresy. As more of his warriors fell victim to the stratagems and deceptions of the meticulously prepared Iron Warriors, Dawn's captains urged him to withdraw and regroup, accepting what he could not, that the Imperial Fists had been outmaneuvered in a siege. Ultimately, Rogel Dawn could not bring himself to order a retreat. Instead, Guilliman resolved that he could not allow his brother to lead himself and his legion to ruin, and he deployed the Ultramarines to relieve the beleaguered imperial fists. Faced with the might of two legions, Perturabo wisely chose to withdraw, having accomplished his objective. By the conclusion of the battle, the imperial fists had suffered a staggering loss of 400 battle brothers, with many more injured. In a grim twist of fate, Perturabo offered the precious, untainted gene seed he had taken from the imperial fists to the Chaos gods for the use of the traitor legions, and in return, apotheosis was bestowed upon him. In the 41st millennium, the Iron Warriors remain a persistent menace to the Emperor's realm. From their demon world of Medrengard within the Eye of Terror, Iron Warriors warbands, led by various warsmiths, frequently launch raids in search of new spoils and technologies to augment their capabilities. The Iron Warriors maintain close ties with the heretics of the Dark Mechanicum and have proven adept at unleashing dreadfully potent new demon engines upon the servants of the Imperium. For solar decades, the Iron Warriors Legion served as the relentless battering ram of the Great Crusade, a weapon wielded to dismantle every seemingly impregnable fortress or unassailable citadel that dared obstruct the Emperor's will. The Fourth Legion became synonymous with ruthless warfare and exceptional mastery in siegecraft, excelling in both offence and defence. Perturabo, its Primarch, earned a reputation as a ruthless and effective warlord. A master strategist capable of discerning the hidden weaknesses of any adversary and exploiting them with brutal decisiveness. To him, defeat was anathema, and victory justified any sacrifice made in blood. However, this celebrated record masked a growing discord within the Fourth Legion itself. This internal strife, born from slights, both real and perceived, manifested as a palpable distance and deepening mistrust between the Iron Warriors and the Great Crusade they served. A festering bitterness took root in the hearts of Perturabo, increasingly paranoid and withdrawn. By the time the treachery of Horus was unveiled at Istvan III, the Iron Warriors were already in crisis, scattered across the stars and divided among numerous deployments, still reeling from a brutal suppression of their homeworld, Olympia. Nevertheless, they responded to the call for retribution against the traitors without hesitation. Yet, when Perturabo, the Iron Lord of the Fourth Legion, led the bulk of his forces to Istvan V, it was not to unleash their wrath upon the traitors, but rather against those who remained loyal to the Emperor. The poison that had long infected the Legion's spirit finally bore its bitter fruit, leading to the suffering of billions in the dark years that followed. Like their brother legions, the Fourth Legion was founded on terror during the final stages of the Unification Wars, which preceded the Emperor's Great Crusade in the mid-33rd millennium. Despite significant surface-level detail on the origins of the Fourth Legion, its early muster grounds are documented to have been established atop the remnants of a recidivist fortress on the Oro plateau of Sek Amrak. The warlike gun tribes, bloodgrieves, and tech enclaves in the surrounding region provided much of the Legion's earliest recruits, as the recalcitrant area was integrated into the fold of Terran unification, rapidly transforming into one of the most steadfast loyalist domains. Documentary evidence indicates that the Fourth Legion's gene seed displayed above-average adaptability, with notably low rates of implant rejection, especially in contrast to the challenges other progenoid types faced during large-scale implantation, challenges that would not be resolved until the acquisition of the Selenar gene labs on Luna. This advantage enabled the Fourth Legion to build its fighting strength swiftly, expanding to several fully battle-ready battalions, while other nascent legions struggled to muster more than an active century. Consequently, the Fourth Legion was rapidly deployed alongside the First Legion, Dark Angels, and the Fifth Legion, White Scars. The Fourth Legion first fought on Terra, obliterating the last remnants of resistance and subsequently participating in the pacification of the Sol system. In recognition of its early successes, the Fourth Legion received priority resupplies of newer weaponry and war machines as they became available through the Emperor's alliance with Mars. Additionally, a noteworthy influx of Terran recruits, originally intended for the Third Legion, Emperor's Children, bolstered their ranks, compensating for ongoing losses sustained in combat. The catastrophic near loss of the Third Legion's gene seed due to suspected sabotage and a viral blight is addressed in other Imperial historical records. It was this adaptability of gene seed and proven success in battle that allowed the Fourth Legion to become one of the most numerous among the Legiones Astartes during the early years of the Great Crusade, facilitating its forces to split among several substantial expeditionary fleets. The most prominent of these was the 8th Expeditionary Fleet, in which the Fourth Legion played a pivotal role. This force conquered or reclaimed 29 Corwood system clusters and annihilated several interstellar Xenos realms over a protracted 11-standard-year campaign, significantly contributing to the Imperium's control. For these achievements, the Emperor recognized and commended the Fourth Legion. From the 8th Expeditionary Fleet, they adopted the emblem of the winged bolt as their first heraldic device, proudly displaying their battle honors as vexilla standards that accompanied the steadfast columns of their legionaries as they advanced into battle across dozens of conquered worlds. As the forces of the Great Crusade pressed beyond the Segmentum Solar, embarking on the expansion of the Great Crusade, multiple sources indicate that the Fourth Legion, which would not reunite with its Primarch until the late 840s of the 30th millennium, quickly lost any specific ties to Terra, both culturally and in terms of recruitment patterns. Despite this, as it forged ahead at the forefront of expansion, its military structure remained resolutely unchanged. The Fourth Legion's commitment to the organizational frameworks, combat methodologies, and armaments established at the onset of the Great Crusade remained steadfast, without the infusion of a new cultural stamp brought by interaction with the Primarch for many Terran years. Consequently, their approach to warfare largely remained unchanged, irrespective of circumstances or adversaries. The Legion relied heavily on relentless and meticulously applied force of arms to surmount obstacles, favoring brute strength over cunning strategies or valiant heroics. These combined factors increasingly set them apart from many of their brother legions. By this period in the Great Crusade, most Space Marine legions had diverged from the foundational Terran model established during their initial muster, whether or not they had been united with their Primarch. In contrast to the Fourth Legion, other brother legions had, within a few short solar decades, evolved distinct and, in some cases, extreme character traits and combat styles that strayed significantly from the original pattern. This constancy and pragmatism in the Fourth Legion's operations stood out starkly against this backdrop. Such traits led some to label them as unimaginative, mechanistic, and even honorless fighters in the eyes of certain other Space Marine legions and their leaders. Horus himself is said to have echoed these sentiments. Conversely, within the high command of the Great Crusade, these very characteristics were viewed as positive attributes, rendering the Fourth Legion arguably more dependable in deployment than some of the more esoteric legions and more willing to execute orders from outside their own ranks without complaint. As a result, the Fourth Legion increasingly found itself engaged in often thankless but crucial campaigns, characterized by relentless attrition and protracted bloodshed, evolving into a workhorse legion, relied upon for both their martial prowess and their unwavering adherence to commands. Moreover, while considerably sized legions such as Leman Russ's Space Wolves, Ferrus Manus's Iron Hands, and Horus's Lunar Wolves were reluctant to divide their forces at the request of minor, merely human theatre commanders, the Fourth Legion accepted any lawful duty assigned to them without hesitation. They repeatedly undertook arduous sieges and drawn-out suppression campaigns that required the might of the Legiones Astartes to achieve victory, yet garnered little acclaim for their efforts. Additionally, they garrisoned worlds deemed too perilous for anyone other than the Legiones Astartes to hold. The Fourth Legion found itself charting a course dictated by others, compelled to obey the directives of the Great Crusade, whether tasked to fight or to die in service. From one war zone to another, the Fourth Legion pressed on without respite or fanfare, taking a grim pride in its largely thankless labour. Thus, the Legion gradually began to change, even as its once great numbers were diminished by attrition and its brother legions surpassed it in renown. With the benefit of hindsight, it is clear that during this period, even before their reunification with their Primarch, a subtle rift emerged between the Fourth Legion and its brother legions, creating a fracture that would only deepen over time. From their earliest days, the Fourth Legion operated with unwavering determination and disciplined might, embodying the solidity and resilience of the metal that would later be reflected in their name. They distinguished themselves as one of the more technologically adept and proficient legions, although they were somewhat eclipsed in this regard by the 10th Legion, the Iron Hands, during the early years of the Great Crusade. The 4th Legion preferred to launch their assaults from a position of overwhelming superiority, delivering maximum force directly against their adversaries. As their role evolved into that of a primary fighting force, often enduring the brunt of protracted combat operations, the 4th Legion increasingly valued meticulous pre-battle strategizing and the use of concentrated bombardment as a precursor to engagement. They expertly calculated fields of fire, utilized high-intensity shelling, and deployed heavy armor alongside mechanized forces to spearhead their attacks, which became the hallmark of the 4th Legion's approach to warfare. To support this tactical inclination, the 4th Legion amassed one of the largest dedicated artillery trains in the history of the Great Crusade. Yet while these tactics reflected a cerebral, pragmatic and calculated approach to warfare, it was equally true that once battle commenced, the Legion would not relent from their assault unless ordered to withdraw by the highest authority, even in the face of sudden reversals or staggering casualties. This fierce tenacity became ingrained within the 4th Legion over time, evolving into a point of pride. They would refuse to accept defeat, regardless of the cost in lives, determined to secure victory against overwhelming odds through sheer discipline and firepower. While the Legion's numerous victories, often uncelebrated, came at a high price, this apparent paradox of a reliance on rationality and intellect, juxtaposed with infrequent yet notable episodes of bloody-minded obstinacy, was most evident during the liberation of the war-ravaged Forge world of Incaladian in a grueling campaign that spanned from the 842nd to 843rd year of the 30th millennium. Although they ultimately secured victory, the campaign resulted in the near annihilation of the 8th Expeditionary Fleet's frontline forces in what could be considered a needlessly costly manner. During this battle, the Legion steadfastly refused to withdraw after an initial assault unravelled spectacularly in the face of an unexpected and unprecedented enemy counterattack. They fought on, tenaciously, adhering to a battle plan that had already disintegrated. Nearly 29,000 of their ranks fell in this single engagement before the enemy forces were worn down through bloody attrition, including many of the Legion's most veteran units, making this battle one of the most costly of its time for the Imperium. What remained of the 4th Legion after Incaladian was a shell of its former self, diminished in favour and lacking a Primarch to guide them. By the end of that decade, it would be accurate to say that the 4th Legion's prominence had greatly diminished as others rose to prominence. Incaladian cast a shadow over the 4th Legion's early successes, resulting in the deaths of many of their senior commanders and the wholesale slaughter of over 2 million mortal Imperial Army soldiers under their command. While the 4th Legion had once been among the most numerous of Space Marine legions, relentless warfare and attrition had taken a toll on their ranks. Not to a dangerously low level, as the quality of their gene seed remained high in terms of implantation ease, but to the extent that several other legions had since eclipsed them in size and capability. When the 20 infant Primarchs were scattered across the galaxy from Terra in their gestation pods by the Chaos Gods, the young child destined to become Perturabo was found on the mountainous world of Olympia, a planet fractured into warring human city-states where the infant was discovered and raised. Perturabo, however, never learned to trust the Olympians. Despite Damocos's efforts to earn the boy's trust and affection, Perturabo never responded to his foster father with any warmth. Many regarded him as a cold, dark, and melancholic youth, yet with a mind as sharp as a blade. Though he maintained an aloof demeanour, Perturabo immersed himself in the local culture, mastering the arts of siege warfare, as Olympia's incessantly warring city-states provided ample opportunity to study both the theory and practice of this specialized branch of combat. Evidence surrounding Perturabo's recovery and subsequent integration into the Great Crusade suggests that the process was swift, with Perturabo accepting his new role almost immediately, a stark contrast to the experiences of several other Primarchs. It is likely that Damikos, eager to bring Olympia into the Imperium's fold as its satrap, viewed the voluntary release of Perturabo as a small price to pay. It is believed that Perturabo had already come to an abstract understanding of his true nature as an artificial posthuman being, anticipating that his creator would eventually reveal himself, even though the specifics remained a mystery until the Emperor arrived in orbit with his fleet in the year 849 of the 30th millennium. Contemporary accounts noted Perturabo's remarkable intellect. While all of the Emperor's posthuman sons exhibited a capacity for learning that surpassed that of unmodified humans, Perturabo's ability to absorb and adapt to new knowledge was extraordinary. It quickly became apparent that he possessed the most exceptional, raw scientific and technical intelligence of all the Emperor's sons. However, much of this brilliance was turned inward. From the outset, Perturabo was a distant and calculating mastermind, indifferent to the society of others, and unwilling to explain his actions or intentions, even to his fellow Primarchs when they met. He approached them with a coldness that bordered on bristling indifference. To the Emperor, such personality traits mattered little. In Perturabo, he found a powerful new weapon for the arsenal of the Great Crusade, a warlord and general whose savage might was rivaled only by his razor-sharp intellect. To Perturabo, every battle and campaign was merely a problem to be analyzed, deconstructed, and overcome. It would not be long before mankind's foes would feel the terrifying power of this ruthless mind in action. Following a brief period spent in the presence of the Emperor fighting valiantly at his side and absorbing the vast knowledge of the Great Crusade, its history, war machinery, and operations, Perturabo was entrusted with the command of the 4th Legion, a force that bore his gene seed. The transfer of authority to him was both rapid and decisive. At that juncture, approximately 35,000 Astartes of the 4th Legion had been assembled to form his independent command, with perhaps an equal number dispersed throughout the conquered territories of the Imperium, stationed in smaller autonomous garrisons and detachments committed to their vigilant duties. Upon instituting a comprehensive review of the 4th Legion's war record, doctrines and practices, and comparing them against those of the other legions, Perturabo deemed his sons inadequate and resolved to take action. The consequence of their shortcomings was decimation. For the failings of the Legion, all would bear the burden of punishment, as all were complicit. The Edict of Decimation proclaimed, "War is unequivocal, uncaring, unforgiving, and blind. Blind also shall be the selection of those who will pay the blood price for the greater failure of your record." 1 in 10 legionaries chosen by lottery was executed without honour, a grim task executed by the hands of their own comrades. This brutal decree sparked protests within the imperial court, with some believing the Emperor had entrusted the absolute power over a Space Marine legion to a madman, while others, more circumspect in their criticisms, suggested that command had been granted too hastily to a Primarch who was still unfamiliar with the ways of the Imperium. Among the most vocal of these critics was Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, who bristled at the indignity faced by valiant Astartes, warriors who had often fought alongside his own legion. This incident sowed seeds of discord between the two Primarchs, a rift that, although later overshadowed by other grievances and rivalries among the Emperor's sons, would remain etched in their memories. The Emperor, however, quelled all dissent. To those who endured the 4th Legion's self-decimation, the message was clear. Such would be the nature of Perturabo's rule: ruthless, unforgiving, and devoid of favoritism or leniency. In Perturabo's service, failure exacted a deadly toll, and for him, war was a binary equation. Their transgression was not that they had faltered in the service of the Great Crusade, indeed they had not. Rather, it lay in their failure to achieve their full potential. It was insufficient for Perturabo that they merely excelled. Their fault resided in not being unrivaled among the legions. Perturabo insisted that his legion must be an unparalleled war machine, and he immediately commenced the transformation of his forces into the instrument of destruction he envisioned, a weapon whose metal he would first test against the rest of the Meitara cluster, on the fringes of the Olympia Majoris star system. The first significant confrontation of the Fourth Legion under the direct command of their Primarch was an assault against an adversary that would profoundly challenge the Legion's resolve and herald the campaign to bring the Meitara cluster into the fold of imperial compliance. With his newly established expeditionary fleet, Perturabo advanced directly toward the heart of the cluster, targeting the hostile force he knew resided there. On Olympia, the enemy Perturabo sought had become little more than a legend, but their last incursion had led to the slaughter and subjugation of tens of thousands, demanding tribute that only ceased with the price of blood. They were known as the self-proclaimed Black Judges, self-appointed guardians of human purity, life and death. Once human, these twisted, withered beings had extended their lifespans into Terran millennia through technology as ancient as it was sinister. Now their emaciated and ravaged forms were encased in mechanized war machines controlled by cybernetic implants. To sustain their existence, they required regular infusions of fresh human genetic material, obtained through a gruesome extraction process. From their stronghold on a barren, ravine-riddled moon known as the Rock of Judgment, they dominated a dozen nearby human-populated worlds through terror, offering a devil's bargain, protection against Xenos assaults in exchange for a steady tribute of the young and healthy. Shamed by their recent punishment at the hands of their new master, the Fourth Legion harboured a desperate desire to prove themselves to Perturabo, and it was the Black Judges who would bear the brunt of their pent-up hatred and fury. The orbital assault on the Rock of Judgment was a direct and brutal undertaking. The moon was well defended by laser batteries, swarms of drone fighters, and the Black Judges' own warp-capable battleships, having withstood marauders and vengeful foes for millennia. Yet it could not withstand the fury unleashed by the Fourth Legion. Without regard for their losses, the Legion crashed through the blockade of warships, with several strike cruisers and battle barges set ablaze, engaging their adversaries at close quarters, launching devastating boarding actions and barrages of melter warhead torpedoes at point-blank range. With the line broken, the Fourth Legion fleet pressed onward, utilizing the armoured prows of their largest capital ships and the bulwark void shields of siege frigates to endure the onslaught of ground fire and effect a landing. Despite their advanced technology reflecting much of mankind's mastery over the stars before the Age of Strife, the Black Judges were few in number, even when counting the tens of thousands of sable-robed accusators and functionaries gene-bred to serve them. Thus, they relied heavily on static defences and automated sentry guns for protection. Leading the charge were Land Raider phalanxes and Shadow Sword companies, surging forward with relentless determination, systematically obliterating all resistance in a storm of energy blasts. Behind them followed relentless waves of mobile siege guns and artillery, their devastating shell fire reducing mountain faces to rubble and entombing gun emplacements beneath choking debris. Such was the apocalyptic firepower of this advancing tide that it annihilated the Black Judges' esteemed defences inch by inch, erasing them from existence. The fiercest fighting erupted when the Space Marines penetrated the dark inner sanctums of the Night Courts, located within the towering citadels of obsidian. Bombarded by lethal neutron ray batteries and assaulted by frenzied mobs of accusators wielding powered chain hammers capable of rending even Astartes' battleplate, casualties mounted, yet the Fourth Legion did not waver. Once the fanatics had been dispatched, the vanguard of the assault force pressed bloodily through the abyssal chambers filled with nightmarish surgical theatres and abhorrent instruments of the justice wielded by these debased oppressors, culminating in their final confrontation with the Black Judges themselves. Sustained by their dark sciences, the armoured life support frames of the Black Judges were nearly impervious to bolter fire, while their razor scourges and ray cannons rendered each one the equal of an Astartes dreadnought in terms of firepower. And there were hundreds of them. Despite suffering horrific losses, the warriors of the Fourth Legion held their ground against these mechanical assassins, even as their comrades fell, torn into bloody fragments, or incinerated within the molten confines of their power armour. The darkness transformed into a storm of muzzle flashes and thunder, punctuated by the screams of the dying and the high-pitched shrieks of twisted minds that had long surpassed human sanity. As the battle raged on, the legionaries took refuge behind the mounds of their own dead, using them as cover against the searing directed energy beams. Time and again they rallied to charge the glimmering judgment engines, enduring the Black Judges' deadly onslaught to plant crack grenades or unleash point-blank melter blasts, determined to bring their foes down. For an age the battle teetered precariously. Within the vaults and corridors the Black Judges maintained the upper hand, and for every one of them that fell, a dozen Astartes paid the toll in blood. It was at this critical juncture that Perturabo made his decisive move. Having keenly observed the unfolding chaos of battle, his superhuman intellect discerned patterns and vulnerabilities amidst the tumult, calculating the precise moment to strike for maximum impact. The Primarch descended upon the ranks of the Black Judges like a bolt of lightning, sending them into disarray. Like a vengeful deity, he carved a path through their midst, blasting and incinerating foes, tearing apart their mechanized frames and ripping the withered bodies from within using his own gauntleted hands. As the Black Judges staggered in shock and attempted to regroup against this new and formidable threat, the gears of Perturabo's strategy began to turn. The elite heavy weapons support units of the Fourth Legion, informally known as Havocs, advanced with precisely coordinated attack patterns, predicting their enemies' responses with uncanny accuracy. Isolating and blindsiding the Black Judges, the Havocs pressed forward relentlessly, delivering their own sentence with a tempest of crossfire from autocannon shells and plasma bolts. By Perturabo's design, the enemy was mercilessly crushed, and their territories were stripped of every valuable resource and piece of technology. Wreckage and armaments flowed back to Olympia, while the long-guarded secrets of the Black Judges fell into the hands of the newly renamed Iron Warriors and their master, who exchanged these treasures with the Mechanicum in return for their assistance. With the world depleted of its resources, the orbital shipyards of the Rock of Judgment, relics of the bygone human age of interstellar conquest, were re-established in orbit around Olympia, set to work crafting a new generation of warships under Perturabo's seal. Following Perturabo's triumph over the esteemed Black Judges and his reclamation of their former territory for the Imperium, he purged the Xenos ectosaurids of Vericonia and subjugated the renegade knight fiefdom of Lixos, thus completing his conquest of the cluster. In this final conflict, Perturabo's legion forcefully resolved a schism that had persisted for millennia since the Age of Strife, reconciling the fractured empire with its erstwhile masters in the Mechanicum, and earning the favour of the Lords of Mars. This era marked a winnowing for the Fourth Legion, a period characterised by trials and tests at the hands of their Primarch. With calculated foresight and brutal experimentation, Perturabo reshaped the Legion in his own image, not one that mirrored the Olympian or Terran ideals, but one forged from his own bleak and unyielding psyche. By the campaign's end in the Meitara cluster, the Fourth Legion of old had vanished, giving way to the Iron Warriors born anew from blood and fire. Upon Perturabo's return to Olympia with his newly named force, the machinery of his designs was already in full swing. In alliance with the Mechanicum, new orbital shipyards and foundries blazed with fervent activity. Many had been salvaged from dead orbits around conquered stars, transported to Olympia, refitted and expanded to serve the needs of his legion. The worlds of the Meitara cluster, too, now offered their tribute of flesh and blood to the Lord of Iron, feeding his legion's insatiable hunger for fresh warriors, weaponry and munitions. All was orchestrated by Perturabo's hand and design. In the crucible of warfare, the Iron Warriors had undergone a profound transformation, with the changes amplifying rather than altering the essence of what had once been the Fourth Legion. Where the Legion had previously exhibited a ruthless willingness to absorb losses in pursuit of victory, they had now evolved into a relentless force utterly indifferent to such considerations, viewing them as beneath them, akin to mortal fear. War had become a lethal equation, one for which the Iron Warriors were exquisitely equipped to solve. A relentless, unyielding engine of destruction, a beast of steel and fire that swept worlds clean and devoured entire armies. At the helm of a newly constituted force, the 125th Expeditionary Fleet, Perturabo commanded the bulk of his legion's strength, quickly establishing it as the battering ram of the Great Crusade. As they fought alongside their fellow legions in succession, they cultivated an unparalleled reputation for brutal efficiency in combat, mastery of armoured warfare, and unrivaled prowess as artillerists. It was said of the Iron Warriors that no fortress crafted by the hands of humanity or Xenos could withstand their onslaught. No stronghold was beyond their reach, and no army could escape being drowned in its own blood beneath their relentless barrage of shot and shell. As time progressed, the wedge driven between the Iron Warriors and the other Space Marine legions became ever more pronounced, fostering a growing sense of resentment, pride and paranoia within the hearts of many members of the Fourth Legion. Through his grim methods and brutal example, Perturabo ignited a reflection of his own dark soul in his warriors, nurturing within them his suspicions, malevolent distrust, and callous indifference to life alongside the relentless determination, cold intellect and strength he sought to cultivate. Given the Fourth Legion's inclination for open battle, their involvement in siege assaults, the most perilous and unpredictable form of warfare, and their collective acceptance of attrition as the price for victory, it is perhaps unsurprising that many sources estimate the Iron Warriors suffered the highest overall casualty rate of any legion during the Great Crusade. This statistic also stands as a testament to the Iron Warriors and the cold, ruthless genius of their Primarch, for such losses were routinely absorbed by the Legion without a significant degradation in their strategic combat effectiveness, and high casualties seldom led to defeat for the Fourth Legion. However, despite their genetically enhanced resilience to mental trauma and psycho-indoctrination, it is believed that this continuous exposure to loss and destruction slowly corroded the Legion's psyche. Perturabo and his Legion sought no friends or allies among their fellow warriors, save perhaps for the agents of the Mechanicum, who assisted them in their pursuit of ever more powerful and efficient means of warfare. In the legions around them, they perceived weaknesses born of self-deceit, a lack of discipline, false mysticism and vanity, as well as both real and imagined slights and insults. Even factions of the Mechanicum, to whom Perturabo's technological prowess was a marvel, harboured distrust toward him and his Legion, viewing them as dangerously self-sufficient and adept, while being ignorant of the doctrines of the Omnissiah's faith. To the forces of the Exertus Imperialis, the Imperial Army, and its auxiliaries, the Iron Warriors held a notably dark reputation. More than any other legion, the Iron Warriors were perceived not only as willing to expend the lives of human auxiliaries as a strategic resource, but as deliberate sacrifices, utilizing them as cannon fodder to deplete enemy firepower in sacrificial waves, or simply to gauge an enemy's strengths by observing how quickly they could be annihilated. Such repeated incidents further tarnished their already hated epithet of the corpse grinders among the common soldiers of the Great Crusade. Open mutiny, quelled with predictably thorough slaughter, became increasingly frequent in war zones under the command of the Iron Warriors. As a result, by the edict of War Master Horus, a standing order was established to ensure that the majority of forces assigned to the Iron Warriors were either indentured criminals or enslaved non-compliants, aimed at mitigating the corrosive effect on overall morale. By the last decades of the Great Crusade, rivalries and mutual disdain characterized the Iron Warriors' relationships with other legions, notably the growing antipathy between the Iron Warriors and the Raven Guard Legion, exacerbated by tensions during the Isisunder War, as well as an increasingly bitter rivalry with the Imperial Fist. Indeed, even when the Iron Warriors and Perturabo fought successfully alongside their fellow legions, such as in the critical conflict against Varg Mashog, their contributions were often met with indifference or guarded disdain by the Fourth Legion's contemporaries. For instance, before Perturabo and the Iron Warriors arrived in the war zone, Overdog Mashog's vast orbital fortifications had repelled numerous attacks from both the Space Wolves and White Scar's legions. Yet, Perturabo, whose strategy ultimately broke the line and facilitated the slaughter of the Orcs, was recorded in the chronicles of his brother legions merely as a nameless comrade in arms. This growing schism, perhaps more apparent in hindsight than at the time, was further exacerbated by Horus's appointment as the Imperial War Master. This major realignment in the deployment of the Great Crusade led to the issuance of a series of directives and disposition orders, some from Terra and others from the War Master. These orders continued to drain the Iron Warriors' legion, scattering a significant portion of its strength across myriad splinter expeditionary fleets, thankless sieges, and garrison assignments in the most perilous and isolated corners of the expanding Imperium. Meanwhile, Perturabo's own 125th Expeditionary Fleet was relentlessly thrust into the jaws of deadly foes, receiving neither reinforcements nor additional resources, save for what they could generate and acquire themselves. Bitter yet steadfast in his resolve, Perturabo complied. In retrospect, such events only served to amplify the resentment and discord within the Fourth Legion, further alienating them from the Imperium they served, while increasingly deranging its warriors in the face of some of the most horrific challenges of the Great Crusade. Indeed, this may well have been part of Horus's design. As the Great Crusade advanced, numerous Iron Warrior citadels were established on liberated worlds, ensuring secure lines of communication and an Imperial occupational force for each planet. Small contingents of Iron Warriors were stationed in these new fortifications, often in absurdly insufficient numbers. A frequently cited example is the Iron Keep on Delgas II, where a solitary tactical squad of 10 Iron Warriors was garrisoned, despite a disgruntled population of nearly 130 million. While other Primarchs, such as Leman Russ, Vulcan, and Magnus the Red, refused to fragment their forces, Perturabo increasingly complied with orders infused with bitterness. The Iron Warriors were being transformed into a garrison legion, with minuscule deployments scattered across the Imperium. Their undeniable success in siege warfare led to them being typecast, making them the automatic choice for any siege or garrison mission, neglecting the fundamental needs of all Astartes for rest and reorganization. Resentment against the Emperor's relentless demands began to fester within the Fourth Legion, particularly within Perturabo himself. More than many who would eventually embrace treachery and align with Horus, the motivations and path of damnation undertaken by the Iron Warriors remain among the most enigmatic and uncertain, rivaled only by the murky history of the Alpha Legion, shrouded in deception. Once exemplars of unwavering loyalty, they did not merely bend. To outside observers, it appeared as though they shattered inexplicably in their allegiance. Those who examine the situation with a dispassionate eye perceive, rightly or wrongly, a legion that has been eroded by relentless horror, excessive attrition, and death in the service of a cause for which they received neither recognition nor gratitude. They see a Primarch and his sons gradually succumb to suspicion, discontent, and an encroaching madness. However, scant evidence exists to suggest a wholesale corruption of the body or the insidious influence of the ruinous powers at work among them, let alone any actual dealings with dark forces prior to the cataclysm of galactic civil war that engulfed the Imperium. For some, the explanation is simpler. Within the Fourth Legion there emerged a savage, jealous arrogance, fueled by nothing more than base bloodlust and dissatisfaction, which ultimately led the Iron Warriors down the path of ruin. Some argue that the Iron Warriors' fatal flaw lay in a fundamental lack of faith, that they did not genuinely believe in the cause of the Great Crusade or the Emperor they served, viewing themselves as little more than machines designed for slaughter. If this perspective holds true, it suggests they were ultimately undone by the very pragmatism and logic that rendered them such ruthless and effective soldiers, leaving them ill-equipped to confront an enemy as existential as doubt and mortal terror. If this is indeed the case, then for Perturabo, the mantle of Primarch became merely a license for slaughter devoid of higher purpose. His conquests were empty and his victories hollow. It has been further suggested that this was the catalyst for their internal derangement and destruction, leaving behind only empty vessels ready to be filled with the uncaring savagery that mirrored the horrors they had endured.